For decades, Carl Icahn, the billionaire investor, has been at the center of some of the biggest corporate takeovers and investments. Now the man known as the Lone Wolf of Wall Street is taking on the world's biggest fast food chain over its treatment of pigs. Over the weekend, Icahn launched a proxy battle with McDonald's by nominating 2 new directors to the company's board. Icahn has asked the fast food chain to stop sourcing pork from farmers who use so-called gestation stalls. They're small crates for pregnant pigs, which have been widely criticized as inhumane. Icahn, who owns a small stake in McDonald's, says his motivation has nothing to do with making a profit.
I think there's a way that I can be really helpful to seeing that happen, because I think that's a situation that's just horrible. It's obscene. You got these companies making all this money and these animals just suffering for no reason.
Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we have an interesting video concerning past presidential candidate Bernie Sanders and a tweet he made in regards to McDonald's and their horrific treatment of the pigs, which they mass genocide for profit. In short, Bernie Sanders retweeted another tweet which had to do with billionaire investor Carl Icahn. The tweet said, "The billionaire investor Carl Icahn began battling McDonald's in his usual fashion, buying shares and pushing his own board candidates. What's different this time? Icahn is asking for better treatment for the pigs whose meat goes into McDonald's products." Bernie Sanders ended up retweeting this specific tweet and said, "Yes, it's important that McDonald's pigs be treated humanely, but maybe it's more important that we take care of the humans who work there by paying them a living wage and making it easier for them to form a union, instead of spending $15 billion on stock buybacks to enrich the wealthy." Now, given this YouTube channel is primarily focused on animal rights, I want to focus on the part of Bernie's tweets concerning pigs. I found what he said very interesting. He implied that he thinks, although McDonald's pigs being treated better is important, maybe it is more important that we take care of the humans who work at McDonald's and give them a living wage. Let's really think about this for a second. While I 100% agree that people should be paid a living wage, and without a doubt this is an important issue to tackle, what does it really mean to say that getting McDonald's workers a living wage is more important than improving the conditions of pigs that are treated poorly for McDonald's products? Is living in your own feces for the majority of your life, enduring an environment so stressful that you may be subject to stress-induced cannibalism, or perhaps being thrown in a gas chamber, not as bad as working for a corporation who is not paying you a living wage? Do we even need to equate the moral value of pigs to humans to come to the very obvious conclusion that everything I just listed that pigs go through in order to become meat is actually far worse than what McDonald's go through in not being paid a living wage? Let's do a quick comparison between the average McDonald's employee who is not being paid a living wage to the average pig that has to go through all of these horrific things in order to become a product for McDonald's to sell. Now, clearly, both of these scenarios for the individuals are terrible and both should be solved. But I am making a very specific point here. How can Bernie Sanders come to the conclusion that it is more important for us to give McDonald's employees a living wage than it is for us to stop McDonald's from literally subjecting pigs to lifelong torture, which ends in murder via a gas chamber? A lot of people, especially left-wing leaning vegans, which by the way, I seem to identify with to an extent, say that we shouldn't be making comparisons between different modes of oppression or different levels of oppression with respect to which is worse. But I find that situations like this clearly weren't doing such a thing. I mean, here we have Bernie Sanders, someone with such a massive influence, saying things like one version of oppression is more important to address than a much clearer, worse version of oppression. This is the kind of reasoning behind much of the vegan community's responses to the recent incident concerning Kurt Zuma kicking his cat. People were upset with the kind of mistreatment toward an animal while not being upset with a far worse treatment of animals, that treatment being billions and trillions of animals being bred, commodified, exploited, and murdered every year for trivial reasons such as taste pleasure. And let me just emphasize this one more time. One need not equate the moral value of pigs and McDonald's employees to come to the specific conclusion I'm trying to draw out here. Imagine if we had dogs being tortured their entire lives only to be eventually murdered, and we compared their life condition to an underpaid McDonald's employee. I mean, which is worse? You can easily recognize here that the dog has it significantly worse and their condition is a much more bad thing than a McDonald's employee being underpaid, all while maintaining the view that a human has more value than a dog, assuming every other factor is held constant. Now, McDonald's has actually responded to Carl's request for McDonald's to source their pigs from more humane sources. In other words, Carl's request for McDonald's to source their pigs from suppliers who commodify and murder pigs more nicely. Nice killing. That definitely makes sense. Anyway, McDonald's has responded saying by the end of 2022, the company expects to source 85% to 90% of its US pork volumes from sows not housed in gestation crates during pregnancy. Despite industry-wide challenges for farmers and producers, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and global swine disease outbreaks, the company expects 100% of its US pork will come from sows housed in groups during pregnancy by the end of 2024. Now, let's remember, even if McDonald's begins to source 100% of their murdered pigs from suppliers who rely on sow housing, as opposed to gestation crates, although sow housing is better than gestation crates, committing to this switch does not necessarily address the underlying moral issue here, which is these pigs being commodified, exploited, and murdered. So let that be understood, because I'm sure with this incoming switch to sow houses as opposed to gestation crates in their, suppliers that they get their pigs from, many McDonald's consumers will hear about this and be like, oh, look, the pigs are being ethically processed now, when in reality, they're still going to the same slaughterhouse, being murdered, and of course, just having their rights stripped away from the moment they're born. Just because you lead someone to their murder in a less bad way than the previously worst way possible does not mean that the murder is now therefore justified. Alrighty guys, that is the end of the video. So Bernie Sanders, if you see this, which I doubt you'll see it, but if you do see it, try to, really ask yourself if you really think that preventing pigs from going through all the things that I listed in this video is less important than bringing human beings better paying jobs. Of course, both are very important and both should be solved, but to make the claim that helping people get higher pay is more important than stopping pigs from literally being subject to torture, suffering, and death, and being gassed and all these other terrible things is quite absurd. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to support my work and you want to support me on Patreon, the link is in my description. I will see you guys in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who's your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe